Sailing around the world has changed us in many ways, not least in the way we shop. A quick trip to the supermarket no longer exists in our world. To get there, we have 2 days of bashing upwind. Then we need to buy 6 months worth of supplies and cram them into Florence. It's just coming up to dawn and we're getting Florence ready to leave St Vincent and the Grenadines and sail up to Martinique. It's been a beautiful stay down here, but the food here is incredibly expensive and Florence is pretty much now empty. We stocked Florence up as much as we could before we left South Africa, but we're now running low on those stocks of tins and things that we brought with us from South Africa. So we're going to head to the most reasonably priced place in the Caribbean to stock up with food, which is Martinique. But to get there, we're currently in St Vincent and the Grenadines, and it's been beautiful here, really calm conditions, which is why we're enjoying exploring Tobago Keys. But we've been waiting for the wind to shift to a more easterly direction to allow us to sail north up to Martinique instead of having to zigzag into the wind. And it has done that, but it's now a little bit stronger, so I think it could be quite a blustery sail today. It's just over 90 miles from here to the southernmost port in Martinique, but we're going to break the journey by stopping for the night in St Lucia hopefully, so that should make about a 60-mile passage and a 30-mile passage.
We are Amy and Matt. We spent the last 6.5 years sailing our 37-foot sailboat Florence around the world. In that time, we have crossed 4 oceans and over 46,000 miles have passed under our keel.
Now we have made it back to the Caribbean, we will explore these famous islands before we recross the North Atlantic Ocean to return to where we began this voyage in England.
We left Bequia at dawn with reefed sails in preparation for the strong winds we're expecting to find gusting between the islands.
One of the features of the Caribbean sailing is the wind shadows and the acceleration zones formed by the islands, because the trade winds come up against these islands, and where they can go through a gap, they accelerate through that gap. And so we had loads of wind and the waves coming through from the Atlantic back there, and now we've sailed into the lee of St Vincent, and the water's gone really calm and flat, although we've still got some really big gusts coming through as they come down the valleys. So we'll have probably no wind just up here, and then we'll be back out into 20-25 knots when we get to the gap between St Vincent and St Lucia, which is the next one up. So here we are, into the lee of the island, and no wind. We may have to motor a little bit to get to the next patch of wind.
You might be wondering why we're sailing past St Vincent, because it looks spectacularly beautiful. I can see all of the jungle covered hills alongside us, and I know that there's some really pretty anchorages on the island. St Vincent isn't actually the only place that we're sailing past. We're actually skipping a lot of the southern end of St Lucia. The reason for that is that there's been lots of violent crime against yachts in this area very recently, and we just don't feel safe stopping there. It doesn't matter how beautiful a place is, if I feel like somebody's going to potentially attack me with a machete when I'm trying to sleep at night, then I really don't want to be there. We tend to research the safety of a country before we travel there. And in the Caribbean, there's actually a lot of information in terms of crime against yachts available online. There's a website that's dedicated to it, and it's also shared amongst loads of Facebook groups for the region as well. Although we've got months to sail through the Caribbean islands, there's not actually enough time to stop in every single island and every single anchorage. So we're just choosing to stop in the places that we feel safe and we feel welcome.
As we came out of the lee of St Vincent, the wind built, and it was time to hoist the staysail in place of the genoa. The staysail is smaller and stronger, which is good for the stronger winds, and it's also a flatter cut, which helps us to go upwind.
It's not just the wind that picks up between the islands, but the waves too. Once we leave the protection of the island, the open ocean swells have a free run at us all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. I'm definitely glad that we put the staysail on. We've consistently got 25 knots. We actually stuck another reef into the mainsail as well. Feels perfect in this weather. I've taken a few big waves over the bow.
We haven't spent much time going upwind in our voyage around the world, and we haven't spent a lot of time playing with this staysail going upwind, so we're still learning the right wind speed to switch over from the genoa to the staysail. So this is all good learning. Going pretty well at the moment, managing to do 35 degrees off the apparent wind, which is a slightly better angle than we do with the genoa, so that's good.
As we came into the lee of St Lucia, the wind and waves reduced again, and we switched back to the genoa and shook out all of the reefs in the mainsail to keep our speed up in the calmer conditions.
Well, it looks like we should have set off a little bit earlier this morning. A bit more before dawn, because we're not quite making it to our anchorage on St Lucia by sunset. It's going to be a beautiful sunset. It's been a beautiful day, but it means we need to pick our way in the dark, which shouldn't be too bad. But we're both feeling like it's been quite a long day. We'd really like to get there now.
As we approached the coast of St Lucia, the night became pitch black. With no moon to light our way, we felt nervous approaching our chosen anchorage halfway up the island. So we switched to our backup plan and continued on to Rodney Bay at the north end of the island. This meant that it would be past 9 p.m. by the time we could drop anchor. However, Rodney Bay is a wide open bay with lots of space to anchor and no reefs to worry about, meaning it would be easy and stress-free to anchor there in the dark. It's also an anchorage that we spent some time in before, so we felt much more confident approaching there in the dark.
The next day we made an early start, continuing our passage onwards towards Martinique and the supermarket.
We had a very short stop in Rodney Bay last night, which is actually the bay that we very first pulled into when we crossed the Atlantic back in 2016. So it was nice to pull in there, even if it was just for the 5 minutes that we were there. So we left Rodney Bay and St Lucia at dawn again this morning, and we're sailing again, sailing upwind towards Martinique and heading for St Anne. It's going to be a full day sail again today and all upwind. Cracking along nicely at the moment, and it's a beautiful sunrise.
So we can see France in front of us. We've just looked at the book and the chart and plotted the closest place we can get Florence to the supermarket. That's where we're going to anchor, and we're going to go and buy cheese and baguette and chocolate and all the stuff that's been way too expensive to buy in all the other countries we've been in recently.
Fruits and vegetables.
Oh yeah, fruits and vegetables too. Yeah. Alright Mum, we'll be healthy. So we've anchored in Le Marin, which is in the south of Martinique, and this is the closest we can get Florence to the supermarket. I can almost smell the French cheese from here. So it's been a while that we've been just eating like lentils and pasta and really basic things on board, because food's been so expensive, and fresh fruit and veg has been really difficult to get in some of the islands further south in the Caribbean. So it's actually really exciting to be somewhere where we can get more reasonably priced food again, or at least we hope. Now normally when we're going to do a big provisioning run on Florence, we put the outboard engine on the dinghy because we fill the dinghy up and it gets really heavy and really difficult to row. But unfortunately, one of the problems we've also got is that the outboard engine is not working at the moment. Hopefully something we can get fixed here in Martinique as well, but that means we need to row to the shop.
We needed a couple of things from the chandlery, so we've split tasks. Matt's headed there and I'm doing the shopping. It's obviously a test of our French because all of the ingredients are in French. So civilized. We normally have to fill up rucksacks and then carry everything a couple of kilometers at least. Still going to take many trips with the dinghy though. We decided that it's just going to be better with one of us, so there's less weight in the dinghy and more room for food. So I'm going to be coming back in a minute.
More food?
Yeah.
How many more trips do you reckon?
I think we need to pack this away first and see how much space we've got left, but I reckon at least another 2. So I've done another trip in the dinghy and this is the result. And this probably isn't going to be everything that I need to get from the shop, but I need to put all of this stuff away and see how much I can fit in the lockers, to see how much space I have left, to then see how much more I can buy. But the trouble is that we're not just trying to buy enough to last us a period of time like we do when we're trying to cross an ocean and get from one place to the other. It's actually going to be probably about 6 months before we find anywhere like here with decently stocked supermarkets at a price that's affordable. So we just need to fit in as much as we can. And the more that we can fit in, the more money that we can save, because what we found so far is that food where we've been in the Southern Caribbean is normally about 4 times the price as what you'd expect in UK or European supermarkets. Things like a small thing of coffee, small brick of coffee in Grenada, that was £10, whereas here you're looking at about £2.50. So it's a huge saving that we're going to make if we can just fit in as much food as possible. The way we work out how much food we need is we work out generally what we would eat in a week, and then we multiply that by the number of weeks that we're looking to provision by. And that really helps, because I find I really need a list of at least rough quantities, because it's overwhelming going into the supermarket and actually trying to think about how much food you need to cover you for that amount of time. It's also overwhelming every time you come to pay at the checkout and hand over your credit card, because it's obviously such a huge amount of money in one go. But I just have to remind myself how much that's going to save us over the next few months. It's not just money that buying this amount of food at once is also saving us, but it's going to save us a huge amount of time, because it's not this easy to get food or to access a supermarket anywhere else. Now we've got everything on board, the next difficult task is working out where to put everything so that it keeps best and that we distribute the weight evenly in the boat, but try and keep it as low down as possible so that we help with the stability. But I also need to be careful with where I store things that require keeping cool, because in the cupboards that are close to the deck of the boat, they can tend to get quite hot in the tropics. Every bit of space got stuffed full, from the huge locker under the bed to the baskets filling the bilges. That's all of the cupboards absolutely crammed full, and it might seem like a crazy way to shop, but for us it's perfectly normal, and I believe it's actually normal within the sailing community too. Most of the sailors that we know carry at least a month's worth of food on board. And you might have seen some dramatic videos on YouTube about people running out of food, but I personally think that that is just drama for YouTube, because anyone that we know would be able to survive for at least a month just from the food that they've got on board.
It's not just food that we need to stock up with here in Martinique. Also, this is a really good place to buy boat parts. There are thousands of boats here and there are some really good chandleries. Now, we've been having a problem with our batten cars, and although I've managed to fix them, and I'll show you how in a minute, the fact that we're going to be going thousands of miles back across the North Atlantic means that if we can buy new ones here that we can have a bit more trust in, then it's definitely the right thing to do. So to change the batten guards, I need to take the mainsail out of the track and take them all off, which is not as easy here because we're in the trade winds and it's pretty windy. So these are the batten cars that we've just taken off. They just unscrew from the front of the batten on the sail. The problems we've been having with these are that the pin in the middle, I can see on this one, is cracked, and we've had one that actually that pin in the middle that holds this in just snapped out whilst we were sailing and the batten popped off the mast. I managed to fix that one by putting a stainless steel pin through with a split ring on the back. That's just a shackle pin, and that worked absolutely fine, even though we've been going upwind and putting it through a little bit of a tough time. But I'm not really confident to keep it that way because it is chafing a little bit on the plastic behind. So we really want to replace these, and since we've seen a couple of problems with the other ones, we would love to have replaced them all. But the new ones here, although we can get them, we're very fortunate for that, are very expensive. They're £50 each. So we decided that we're going to replace the top 3. So that means have a problem with any of the other 2 lower down, then we can just reef the sail and the 2 that are a problem will be not used. So that'll be fine if we're sailing along. And then we'll also keep the old ones, which I've managed to fix and make working again with a new metal pin, as spares. So that saves us from replacing all 5 of them. If we were somewhere with a lot more time, you'd probably be able to get some more pins made or riveted into these to replace them, but we could do with some spares anyway. I don't really like sailing around with no spares for something that I've known have had break in the past. So we mentioned earlier that we couldn't use our outboard engine, and thankfully we've actually been able to fix that here as well. The problem was the propeller. Although we don't think we've hit anything with this, we've actually broken the rubber insert that goes between the propeller and the bush on the middle, so that when we increase revs on the engine, the propeller shaft was spinning inside the propeller, but the actual propeller itself was not spinning, so the engine wouldn't drive us very fast. So unfortunately this one doesn't have a shear pin like the old designs does. This has a rubber bush around the prop, so we actually had to replace the whole prop, which cost €120, which is about a fifth of the cost of the entire engine from when we bought it in Thailand. Very expensive, but we're very glad that we could actually just buy one here and we can be instantly back in action. It's really lucky this has happened here where we can get a new prop. Now I actually had a real trouble getting this old prop off, because the way you're supposed to get it off, you need to get this nut off the end and then you can slide the propeller off. But to get that nut off, you're supposed to stop the shaft going round so that you can undo the nut. But because this bush has gone in the middle, you're supposed to hold onto the propeller or block it here, and then you can get a spanner on this. But because that wasn't holding onto the shaft anymore, it wouldn't stop the shaft going round. So this was just going round and round and not undoing, until I phoned a friend and he had the genius idea of holding onto the flywheel, put the engine in gear and then hold onto the flywheel up the top. That held the shaft and then I could get the nut off. So we spent a lot of time here getting parts, fixing things up and getting the boat fully stocked up with food. We've also filled up the diesel tank at the dock and the water tanks. So Florence is fully stocked and ready to go and explore some more of the Caribbean islands.
Next time we explore north to Guadeloupe. Don't forget to subscribe to catch the next episode. We release a video every 2 weeks.
If you'd like to find out more about behind the scenes on Florence, track our progress across the oceans in real time, find out where we are right now, or ask us pretty much anything, then please head over to our Patreon site and join the crew. We would like to thank everyone who supports us to make these videos possible, and a special thank you to our star patrons.